For ages, legends have been told about mysterious creatures, such as trolls, living under or near bridges. There have also been many myths and legends about half-goat, half-men creatures, such as fauns and satyrs. If you think that these creatures only reside in legends, then you may be in for a surprise.
Louisville, Kentucky is home to one of these legendary creatures, a creature that has come to be known as the Podbyte monster. If you're going to go researching for this creature, first make sure you pacify the land and the residents, because failure to say Louisville correctly will likely get you kicked out of the state.
Yeah, one false Louisville or Louisville, and you're doomed.
You're doomed.
All kidding aside, there is a legend and even sightings of a part man, part goat, or part sheep creature lurking on the train trestles of the Norfolk Southern Railroad over the Podbyte Creek near Louisville, Kentucky. One of the things that makes this frightening cryptid unique is its kill count. There have been at least 12 deaths upon the trestles since 1968. The irony is that most of these deaths, while attributed to the beast, are not by the hands of the beast at all, but because trespassers find themselves trapped on the rails with oncoming trains.
According to myth, the features of the Podbyte behemoth resemble the body of a man and the lower torso of a sheep or a goat. It has short horns protruding from its forehead, alabaster white skin, an aquiline nose, and wide-set eyes. The creature is also said to have long greasy hair that matches the color of the fur on its legs. The most unusual characteristics are its supernatural ones. The creature, it seems, has preternatural abilities to use mind speak, hypnosis, or voice mimicry, similar to a siren luring people onto the tracks where they are then run down by trains. Legend also has it that the Goatman will drop down onto automobiles, passing under the trestles.
No one, of course, has ever seen the beast. Actual sightings would only get in the way of the myth. Could the legend be true? Or is the real monster the curiosity that drives real people to trespass the 8-foot fence that protects them from the trains, a 90-foot fall, death, and ultimately the beast?
Origin stories for the Podbyte monster abound. How could such a monstrosity such as this come to exist? One origin story says that the monster was a human-goat hybrid, a circus freak, who vowed revenge for a life of abuse and mistreatment. Legend says he escaped from the circus after a train derailed. This legend links the Podbyte monster to the legend of a ghost train, which is also supposed to occupy the same territory on the Norfolk Southern trestles.
The most popular legend claims that the Goatman is actually the contorted reincarnation of a local farmer. Legend states that the farmer was going to lose his farm and livelihood, and in an effort to recoup some of his losses, struck a deal with the Terrible One and offered his goats as a satanic sacrifice in exchange for otherworldly powers and the ability to save his farm. Of course, Satan accepted this offering, but in a terrible turn of irony, doomed the man to become the legendary Goatman.
One story mentions a chemist who was burned by an explosion that deformed his face, forcing him to live as a hermit. There is even a story of a farmer becoming, too close to his goat?
Ew, gross!
Creating a human hybrid creature.
Stories of the Podbyte monster have been around for over 3 generations, and they all follow a basic structure. The monster, using its supernatural powers, lures its victims unwillingly onto the bridge. Once the victim is on the trestles, they are ultimately met with an untimely death by an oncoming train. Other variations suggest that simply seeing the creature, whose sight is so unsettling that people purposely throw themselves off the tracks in fright, just to get away from it and its blood-stained acts.
In the late 1980s, the legend led to the development of a 16-minute film, The Legend of the Podbyte Monster, which was shot on the trestles. Fearing the movie would fuel teenage bravado, the Norfolk Southern Railroad, issued a statement warning about the dangers of the trestles. A fence was placed with visible caution markers, and they even threatened prosecution to any trespassers. This hasn't kept thrill seekers away.
Stories are hard to find because people do not usually live to tell them. The following story was adapted from a story found on Reddit.
I went out to the Podbyte Trestle Bridge with my girlfriend one night. We were just sitting in the car when all of a sudden she got this mischievous look in her eyes. And she jumped out of the car and she ran into the woods. I had no idea what was going on, so I jumped out of the car and I ran after her. But the strange thing was that every single time that I got close to her, she seemed mysteriously to get farther and farther away. The next thing I know is she is standing in the middle of the tracks on this bridge. Now, I was angry with her for being on the bridge, and I yelled at her to get off of it. This was no longer my idea of a good time, and I wanted to leave. She became visibly upset at me, yelling. She broke down, she cried, and I ran over there to console her and to see if I could coax her off of this bridge. It was right then that I felt it, and then I heard it. The train was coming. Now we jumped up, we ran as quickly as we could towards the other side of this bridge. It was then that she fell, and she pinned her leg between these railroad ties. Now I pulled and I pulled, but it would not budge. She was stuck, and I had to make the hardest decision of my entire life. I had to choose to stay and die with her, or to leave. Now I'm sorry to say that fear got the better of me that night, and I left her there alone on the bridge. As I began to pull away, she panicked and she grabbed onto me. She wasn't going to let go. Panicking, myself at the side of this oncoming train, I had to fight her off to save my own life. I reached the end just in time to turn around and to see this train run over her. You know, this distraught, sobbing, I made my way back to where she was, but there was no signs that she was ever there. No body, no blood, or clothing. I was so confused. I made my way back to the car and contemplating the entire way the disturbing calls I was going to have to make to not only the police, but her family. It was then that I saw her standing in the woods. Apparently she had ran into the woods from the car to use the restroom, only to come out and have her own strange experience. The experience of seeing me on this bridge with another woman that looked just like her. She stood there in shock as she watched the train come and run over the woman and almost killing me. It was the most frightening experience either of us have ever had.
Is this the mimicry that the creature is known for? Is this what draws so many so-called reckless people out onto the bridge to their untimely deaths? Have they all been deceived?
Goatman sightings are not rare. There are many comparable stories of these types of creatures across North America.
In Texas, there is a Lake Worth monster. This Goatman hybrid is nicknamed the Goatman of the Lake, or the Island Monster. The Island Monster is said to be at least 7 feet tall and possesses super strength. He is known for drifting through treetops and dropping down with force and power onto the hoods of passing cars.
Lake Worth is west of Dallas and just east of Fort Worth. In the center of this lake is a little island known as Greer Island. This is believed to be the stomping grounds of the Lake Worth monster. Sally Ann Clark tells a story in her book, The Lake Worth Monster of Greer Island, of an alarming encounter with this monster. Jim Stevens and 2 of his friends were out driving on the island looking for the Goatman when it landed on the hood of his car. He swerved violently, but the creature wouldn't let go until he had crashed into a nearby tree. Stevens described this creature as being over 7 feet tall, half man, half goat, being covered in fur and scales.
There is another Goatman who is said to roam the Los Angeles National Forest. Author J. Nathan Couch has researched this cryptid, and according to him, the legend's origin is based on a local farmer whose son was mutated by either atomic radiation or DDT and now roams the National Forest area. The legend seems to change with the times, but whatever the legend, it always involves a disfigured Goatman creeping around the forest.
I suspect that the next generation of this story is going to involve 5G networks. There is a story on Reddit written by a man who claims to have encountered this weird creature on the edge of the Los Angeles National Forest. He and some friends had been camping there for several days when some strange things started happening, such as mumbling and chanting outside their tents. When they went to look, there was nothing there. One night, they were surprised as the cold fire sprang to life like gasoline had ignited it. The strangest thing they experienced was when the thing in the forest not only mimicked what they had said, but perfectly mimicked the appearance of one of the young men in the group. The mimic looked just like the young man, and they both stood there, visible at the same time. The group of campers fired on the creature, but the weapons appeared to do no damage. They finally packed up and left, deciding never to return again. Is this another example of a Goatman presenting as a near-perfect mimic?
The Goatman of White Rock Lake is described as being a large, 7-foot-tall creature with horns and hooves of a goat. The creature stands upright like a man. Those that have seen him say his body, legs, and face are very human-like. His skin has a yellowish-greenish tint, and he has long, gnarled fingers with long, grotesque fingernails.
White Rock Lake is near Dallas, Texas, and in 2001, Sandy Grace told of an encounter she had with this creature. She was jogging along the 9-mile-long lake trail one afternoon when she felt a terrifying and acute sense of dread. She then found herself face to face with a horned Goatman-like creature. The strange creature started walking towards her. He was large and covered in thin, coarse brown hair, and had 2 large horn-like protrusions coming out of his forehead. He had an evil grin on his face and quickly advanced towards her. As he came within 15 feet of her, he crouched down and instantly disappeared in a flash of light.
The legend of the Bowie, Maryland Goatman sounds very familiar, as it mimics many of the other Goatman legends. According to this legend, a scientist from the Belleville Agricultural Research Center was experimenting with DNA when he created a man-goat hybrid. This hybrid now stalks the woods and railway tracks with an axe, looking for victims.
There is a story on Reddit about an encounter with the Goatman of Bowie, Maryland. 2 young men went out into the woods just outside of Bowie to smoke a cigarette. They wandered along the tracks, but chose not to linger because they felt like they were being watched. The eerie feeling stayed with them, and they eventually heard a helicopter approach and shine a spotlight on something on the tracks. What they saw in the spotlight frightened them so much they ran home. They described seeing an 8 to 9 foot tall, part goat, part man, standing on the tracks, just mere feet from them. The strange monster screamed at them.
Was the helicopter tracking the beast? Later, the young men learned that the police were searching the woods that night because several people had reported some strange screaming noises coming from the woods that sounded like someone was being raped or killed. It appears that this monster was at least real enough for the police to search it out with their spotlight.
The Hogsback Road in Richfield, Wisconsin, is a deadly winding road known for its high winds and steep cliffs. It's not surprising that many people have perished along this road. The road isn't just famous for its dangers, it's famous for its legends. And one of those legends involves a murderous Goatman.
This Goatman legend started in the 1870s. He is described as a half man, half goat. His upper body is that of a man with horns and sharp fangs, and the lower half of his body being that of a goat with stringy red hair. The monster spends his time roaming Hogsback Road, looking for broken down travelers and star-crossed lovers. When he attacks, he kills, and leaves his victim's body swinging upside down in the trees like a gruesome wind chime.
The origin of the Hogsback Goatman begins with an ordinary traveler who died along the road. The legend states that his restless soul cannot find peace because active occult practices keep bringing him back. The Goatman seeks revenge by appearing to weary drivers at night, carrying a goat's head, and causing them to drive off the road and down into the steep gullies. The new souls that are collected are then used to lure the living into investigating the area and their murders. It is even said that the evil energy on this roadway has hitchhiked a ride home with people, lingering in their houses as shadows and disembodied voices.
There is a story from the 1870s that warns against traveling the treacherous road at night. There was a newlywed couple who chose this path at night when their wagon broke down. Stranded, the man left his new wife to seek help. Alone, the wife saw a creature covered in red hair with horns and a goat muzzle. She was so frightened she didn't dare move from the wagon. In the morning, she saw large hoof prints. She followed the prints until she found the mutilated remains of her husband.
Some of these stories are really gruesome.
I know.
There are tales of a Goatman in the Nag's Head Woods in Kill Devil Hills, North Carolina. Jess, what could possibly be sinister about a place called Nag's Head?
Or Kill Devil Hills, come on.
Nothing terrible has ever happened here.
The legend of the Nag's Head Woods Goatman starts with a lonely hermit. He lived in a small building in the Nag's Head Woods, made his living and spent most of his time raising goats. This quickly earned him the nickname of Goatman. One day, a group of delinquent teenagers went to the old man's shack with the intent of antagonizing him. They were angry when they found that he wasn't there and proceeded to take their revenge on his goats, killing all of them.
When the man returned and saw what the teenagers had done, he chased after them with his axe, transforming into a half-goat, half-man creature. There is a small yellow hunting cabin in the Nag's Head Woods that people speculate was the Goatman's dwelling, and if you pass by it at night, you might be chased by an axe-wielding Goatman.
In the McClintock Wildlife Management Area of West Virginia, there's a whole new breed of wildlife known as sheep squatch. This cryptid is a long-haired carnivorous quadruped who has been reported roving in the western hills of West Virginia. Sheep Squatch is reported to be about the size of a bear with white wool-like fur and saber-like teeth. It has a long snout like a dog and horns like a goat. Its forelimbs end in paw-like hands like a raccoon, but larger. It has a long, hairless, possum-like tail.
I don't care, Jess, what this thing is. It's now my new favorite cryptid. The creature has been around for several generations and was first documented by folklorist Ruth Ann Musick in 1965 in her book The Telltale Lilac Bush. She tells how the sheep squatch originates from Kanawha County, West Virginia, in the low hills and the Kanawha River region. While not precisely a goatman, this creature still has some of the same goat cryptic characteristics.
In an online article entitled Sheep Squatch, Ed Rollins told a story of his encounter. He was walking along a creek bank north of Bethel Church Road when he heard something large break through the brush. He figured it was a large dog or stray cow, so he wasn't very worried. There weren't really any predators in the area. What he did see challenged his beliefs of what was out there.
What I saw emerge from the brush was a large brownish-white creature. Its fur looked dirty and matted, as if the animal did very little in the line of self-grooming. I can't be sure if I was looking at a dirty white animal or a brownish animal with a white undercoat. It was late in the fall, so it makes sense that it might be putting on a winter coat. The creature moved on all fours as it breached the brush line and knelt to drink from the creek. Its front limbs, the only limbs that I saw clearly, ended in what was markedly paw-like hands. Its head was long and pointed, like a canine, and it had largish horns, not antlers, but single-point horns.
Ed hid in the brush and watched this creature for a while. He was afraid to stay and afraid to run. After a few minutes, the monster crossed the creek and continued across Sand Hill Road until he could no longer see it. As soon as it was gone, Ed ran as fast as he could back to where he parked his car. One thing he remembers distinctly about the incident is the smell of sulfur. Whether this creature smelled of a high concentration of sulfur from the lakes and rivers it drank from, or some other source, either way it smelled foul.
Author Kurt McCoy of White Things, West Virginia's Weird White Monsters, tells of some witness accounts in his book. One account of the sheep squatch had to do with a car full of women making their way home after a family reunion. They were driving through the McClintock Wildlife Management area when they had a strange encounter. The roads were treacherously covered in snow, and they were forced to plow slowly along the roads when something strange stepped out of the woods. What they saw was around 7 to 8 feet tall and covered in shaggy white hair. It had legs like a man, and the face looked long like a sheep with horns like a ram. Upon spotting the car, the sheep squatch froze and then bolted into the woods. The frightened women sped up and got home as fast as they could, given the wintry conditions.
One story was of a miner who spotted a big white-gray thing that he said was not an animal, but he couldn't tell what it was. There was a motorist who saw an animal on a hillside with a long face. It looked like it was either covered in rags or was shedding its winter coat.
Sheep squatch is unusual, large and scary, but unlike typical Goatman sightings, it's not violent. There is no known legend or backstory to its origin. It just seems to be there.
As we can see, Goatman sightings are not rare. They are seen and experienced all over North America. What are they? Who are they? And how they became varies. As with many other cryptid-type creatures, we may never know their true origins. But one thing is for sure.
If you're in Louisville, Kentucky, stay off the Polk Lake Bridge.